Welcome to The Voice of Experience, Learning from Leaders, a series of interviews which contribute to a teacher profession project. My name is Peter Finn, the Principal of St Mary's University College, a college of Queen's University in Belfast, and I'm very pleased to welcome Máire Thompson. Máire is currently the Principal of Hazelwood Integrated College in Newtownabbey. She's been recognised for her leadership qualities by a wide range of organisations, including the prestigious award of an Honorary Doctorate for Services to Education by Ulster University in 2022. Máire, we are very pleased that you are here to provide us with the opportunity to learn from your leadership experience. Now, first things first, at a sort of interpersonal level, tell us about your own connections with St Mary's.
My first connection, believe it or not, was on a teaching fellowship. The GTC and I had offered opportunities for leaders to come out of education. I was a senior leader at the time, not a principal, and to spend a term in an institution, and I spent the term here. And it was my first exposure, I think, to the really intimate workings of St Mary's, and I loved it. I don't think I really had an understanding of what exactly went on and to what extent, and I suppose the engagement with the students, the friendly levels with the lecturers, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And from that, then when I became principal, I was offered to come and undertake interviews for the BEd course, and I availed of that opportunity. In fact, just finished this year doing it as well. And then I always said, when my children came of age, if they wanted to teach, that I would love them to come here. And this year my daughter applied and was very successful. So I was delighted that she was able to get the opportunity to come here, because I was able to firsthand, I suppose, see the high standards of education that goes on in here, but also the nurturing around the students, which I really, really enjoyed.
Well, thank you for that very kind comment, and you clearly know us very, very well. I'm going to take you back to the very start and ask you the question as to what inspired you to want to be a teacher, and indeed, where did you start your career, and maybe some comments about your early years in the profession.
So I love sport, always was involved in sport, and I accidentally fell into working with some teachers, or playing basketball with some teachers, and one of them now a professor at the University of Ulster in PE, Deirdre Brennan, and then my other coach, Barney Ball, and they kept saying to me, "Máire, you would be a great teacher, you would love teaching." And I just didn't know, but I had a great teacher. I was a student in St Louise's in the Falls Road, and I had a great teacher there. Didn't teach me science, but was the basketball coach, and I loved her. And she just exposed me to opportunities to travel with sport, to meet new people, to go to tournaments, all of that. So I enjoyed those interactions, and that was my first sort of inkling. I enjoy working with people, and I enjoy the environment with young people. So I then applied to University of Ulster to undertake PE, and was successful, and it just went from there. And when I qualified, I struggled, I think, in my A-level years, in that I was very focused on my sport, and my father would say, "You're never going to get a degree in basketball, Máire," and luckily enough, I did enough to get through. And then when I went to Jordanstown, and I was able to, I suppose, study some areas of, some more refined areas like psychology, mechanics, I really started to enjoy it. And when I qualified, a post came up in my own school in St Louise's. So my first teaching job was in St Louise's, and I had the opportunity then to coach with the teacher that actually got me into sport. So it was lovely. It was lovely to go back. It was lovely, I suppose, to get an opportunity to teach in my old school. I was just glad to get a job. And I suppose for me, I always just wanted to make a difference, because I was very fortunate that I was exposed to great, fabulous mentors, teachers, people in sport and also in education, who really wanted me to do well. And they could see things in me that at that early stage that I couldn't see in myself.
That's very interesting. We do share an interest in sport, by the way. My sport was track and field, and a lot of what you've said relates to me getting into teaching and profession, etc. And I'm very taken by your comment about those people who have inspired you, and the inspiration is clearly obvious today. So thank you for that. Now, as you were progressing through your career, what kind of professional development opportunities were you able to access, and did those professional opportunities make a big difference?
For me, I was always interested in doing anything that would make me a better teacher. And I don't know if that comes with sport and the aspiration to always be better, to do better, to reflect, and to try and, I suppose, acquire new knowledge. So I think any opportunity within a school setting to undertake development outside of school, I always had my hand up. Yes, I'll do that, I'll try that. But I probably would say, as a leader, the most significant thing that had impacted my practice and really give me a refined lens around school improvement and leadership was the opportunity to work as an Associate Assessor with ATI, with the Inspectorate. And I still feel that programme that runs alongside the inspection process is probably one of the best opportunities for professional development of any leader, because the exposure to, I suppose, the expectations of school leaders and school improvement, the networking, the friendships, the opportunity to go and learn from best practice and colleagues in other schools, I just felt it was immense. And it forced me to look out as opposed to constantly looking into your own school. And I think it afforded me with many, many opportunities. And I always, when I always ask about it, I always say my journey of leadership and my journey of school improvement in the schools that I've been in has been difficult. It hasn't always been easy. But I think that exposure and that opportunity would probably be one of the single biggest things that positively influenced my practice.
I think there's great learning from what you've just said about your role with the ETI. And I think that young people who are listening and watching this interview should take note of that. It's a very interesting experience you've had, and really worthy of people taking an interest in what you've just said. We'll go to another level, and it's the level of philosophy. Now, philosophy is a big, grand term, of course. But if I could ask you, what are the main elements of your personal philosophy of education? In other words, the guiding principles by which you lead and learn, of course.
I suppose my fundamental belief is that every child deserves a right to an education, irrespective of where they're from, how many parents they have, who they're living with, what they've been exposed to. And I feel it's our job as educators to provide them with the best experience that we can. And yes, some of them will come with challenges, as will the staff. Some of them will come and they may have been exposed to very difficult things, or they could have to navigate some challenges on the way. But it is our job as educators to try and help them manoeuvre around those obstacles and to provide them with the skills to cope and the strategies and the self-belief and the optimism to believe that they can do and they can be whatever they want to be. And I think that's the job of educators. And my values are that not only just in terms of their academic performance, which is really, really important, because I always say to the children in our school, you know, nobody ever asks you how hard was your life. They say, do you have certain qualifications? And that will open one door. And once the doors open, yes, you can certainly talk them through your life experience. So I think it's very, very important to provide the best possible opportunities of learning for children to allow them to achieve. But also my philosophy is that you want them to be decent human beings. You want them to be kind. You want them, yes, to work hard and aim high, to do all of those things. So for me, my philosophy is you work hard, you get the children to work hard, you help equip them with the skills that will make them better contributors to society. And I think you also try and equip them with those life skills that will make them be decent human beings.
I'm very interested in the comment you made about caring and kindness. Maybe you'd say a little bit more about that, because teachers perform so many roles in a school, but I'm certainly of the view that the moments of kindness and the moments of care can make a huge difference to an individual pupil who's having difficulties. Is that your experience?
Absolutely. And I think there's a famous phrase, and the phrase goes something like, people may not remember what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel. And I think, you know, with a personal example of that this year, and I can talk about it, my daughter was completing her A-levels, her last year of her A-levels, and her father was terminally ill and was dying. And she had to go to school, and she had to go from school over to the hospice. But the school and the staff were really kind. They allowed her to leave early. They put some things in place to provide her with opportunities for a breathing space. They checked in with her. And all of those things, by the end, I wasn't concerned about the grades. My priority was her well-being, her happiness, how she was coping with things. And as a result of their kindness and as a result of how they engaged with us and how compassionate they were, we'll never, ever, ever forget that. You know, the grades we'll remember, yes, in the sense that it allowed her to get to the next stage of her journey. But how the school and how those individual teachers treated her and treated me in a time of grave difficulty, I think was just immense. So I think irrespective of whether you go into work in, you know, a non-selective sector, grammar school, higher education, how you treat people, how compassionate you are, how kind you are, I think that irrespective of, you know, where you come from, as a young person, you may be exposed to obstacles and barriers in your life, and that might not always be, for example, educational, social, disadvantage. It could be a parent has died. It could be, you know, divorce. It could be illness. It could be, you know, something yourself, your own mental health. So there's just a kaleidoscope of issues around, I suppose, that young people face. So it's really, really important, I think, as educators, that we really, really positive relationships with them and that we have things in place that will allow them to gain, I suppose, confidence in dealing with some of those challenges that they face, which will then equip them for life. So I think as educators, I always say to people, because I was a physical education teacher, you are a physical education teacher and physical education is the vehicle that you use to deliver education, but you are a teacher of children first and foremost. Children are, and that to me is the most important thing. And I always think when I'm thinking about appointing new teachers and I see them coming in, I always think, what would you be like with my children? Are you nice? Are you kind? How would you be on a bad day? Yeah. You know, what sort of empathy do you have? And funny, from interviewing people and looking at a very knowledge-based approach to teacher interviews, I've now started to reflect and think I need to really, and we've adapted things in our own school to focus more on those values, because I think acquisition of knowledge can be acquired through learning and time and experience and development and all of that. But the person that you are and your values and how you treat people, I think for me that underpins everything.
Yeah. And what you've done over the last few moments is to demonstrate how values are then manifest in behaviour such as caring, such as the wonderful example you gave to us. And in fact, here at St Mary's, when I speak to our final year student teachers, I use the term disposition. You know, what is your disposition to other people? What is your disposition to the pupils? Yes, you have the knowledge, you have the skills, you have the aptitudes, but your disposition and how you come across to other people is so, so important. We're talking now about the teaching profession. And there's a big movement now towards school improvement, which in turn is meant to mean pupil improvement as well. There are many factors involved in this, and you'll get the factor of government policy, financing, IT facilities, resources, you know, all the myriad of things that make up the equation of school improvement. What's your view on the role of teachers in the process of school improvement?
I think as teachers it's important to be reflective practitioners. I think we're always learning, and I think as a leader, as a principal, the moment that you think you have it sussed and you don't need to learn, I think you're in trouble. So in order to, I suppose, influence positively the outcomes and the experience of young people, we always need to be working in a culture where we're consistently learning, where we're reflecting, where we're looking out, where we're identifying things that could make us better, where we're reading around the subject, where we're maybe be visiting areas or places. So for example, I judge the UK Headteacher of the Year Awards every year for Pearson, and I get an opportunity to see practice in Scotland and Wales and the rest of the UK. And sometimes you can pick wee small nuggets that, you know, that you can bring to your own school that would really, I suppose, influence practice. But then the other side of that is that sometimes contextually you can't lift something and put it into a different environment because it won't suit and it's not applicable and it doesn't suit your own context. And it's knowing that, but it's also being confident as a teacher, as a practitioner, to try new things out. Also to engage young people, because sometimes we're reflecting on what we're doing and we're trying to do all this wonderful work and we don't ask the young people. And I think it's really, really important to find out what their learning experiences are like. How are you finding the learning experience? Not as a means to beat the teacher up, but as a means to improving, maybe trialling it initially with a class that you're very, very comfortable with. And I think that will allow you to improve, because sometimes a small tweak, as opposed to maybe a whole big massive turnaround of practice, could be something that could make a massive difference in terms of the impact that you're having in the classroom, in terms of your pedagogical approach to the delivery of your subject.
You'll know that this society has to continue to learn more and more about educational disadvantage. And you've been in a situation where you've been leading a school which is addressing educational disadvantage. I suppose, what have you learned most about that process, about the process of genuinely tackling educational disadvantage?
I think when we're tackling educational disadvantage, firstly, it's important to be unjudgmental. Children arrive in circumstances sometimes of poverty, or maybe family dysfunction, or maybe with exposure, you know, to living in care or being part of that care system. And some of those experiences, I'd say 100% of them, are not of the children's making. So the first thing is, it's really, really important to allow children to come into school and to greet them in an unjudgmental manner. I think the second thing is to have high expectations. I think, yes, you may be exposed to, you know, poverty. You may be exposed to, for example, what we are finding is you know, we have 50% free schools meals, but we also have what we would call working poor. You know, a significant amount of maybe students whose both parents are working, but who are really, really struggling because of maybe 4 kids or 3 kids or whatever, and the cost of living and everything else in the current environment. So I think it's important to be unjudgmental. I think it's important to have high expectations. I think it's important to be discreet, and also to have, you know, families that maybe come from a position where they're struggling or experiencing poverties. They have pride, they have high expectations, they want their children to do well. So all of those things don't necessarily reflect an environment that's non-aspirational. So I think the non-judgmental plus, but it's also about doing other things. How can we be better as practitioners? So in our school, for example, we have trialled an on-site social worker. So we have a permanent social worker now for the last 6 years. I don't have the skill set to be able to undertake some of the specialist work that's required in working with some of the children that present with high levels of trauma. And the social worker can do that. I think in a post-COVID environment, we are seeing significant amount, or an increase really, in children presenting with mental health problems and anxiety. And we have an on-site mental health nurse, and the on-site mental health nurse, again, is an expert in that area and will allow us to undertake early intervention in school with access to young people, hopefully in a preventative manner prior to going to the likes of CAMS or whatever, particularly when they have such long waiting lists. So it's also about putting things in place that will allow people, the barriers. I'll give you an example. So we have a uniform shop. The uniform shop is in the bungalow at the very entrance to the school. It's never manned by anybody in the school in terms of teaching staff. It's manned by the Parents' Council. We had maybe 200 families that came last year. We have a school of 1,100. I've no idea of the families who came and who used it. The Parents' Council do that. And it takes away the stigma of people knowing your business, or, you know, people in a school environment potentially judging it because you can't afford to get, you know, to pay the uniform, because some of the uniforms are extortionate low. May I add, I think ours is quite reasonable. But, you know, if you have a couple of children and you have to get trainers and you have to get a bag and you have to get your PE kit and all of that. So we have that. We want to run a breakfast club all year, which is free. We also have every December, and this is the 5th year that we've been doing it, and we've been able to do it alongside conjunction with sponsorship from Deloitte. We've offered free school meals for the whole school for the month of December, because we feel that, families are under massive pressure in terms of expectation coming up to Christmas and having to pay lunches on top of that and get everybody organised. So we do things like that. We do a lot of stuff under the radar. We do hampers, we do cash for kids, we have hygiene packs with period poverty. We're actually in June bringing in a barber for 2 days for some of our boys. And we're trying to make school an environment where if you need a wee bit of help and support, that there's no stigma attached to that. And also really that emotional support as well, that sometimes if children are experiencing particular difficulty, that we can signpost them to not only the social worker and the mental health nurse, but also a counsellor or a youth work. And we have in school this year for the first time, it's called the Hazelwood Hub, and it's an online site. And for all of the different areas of challenge, like for example, bereavement, addiction, SEN, there are organisations that straddle all of North Belfast that families and children can access it at just a click of a button, and they have that privacy to do that outside the realms of school as well. So I think it's really important to do things like that so that access, support, help, all of those things are not something that you're embarrassed about. It's trying to destigmatise it. It's also trying to support children in the environment, having high expectations, and also providing support and being aspirational about their potential. Yes, you may have experienced difficulties. Yes, we're going to have to help you do that. Yes, we can help you get the new shoes sorted out, but you need to get your exams, you need to be in, we'll help you on your way, and you have wonderful opportunities ahead. Let's go.
I'm sure those who are listening and are watching this interviews will be really impressed as to how you've taken underlying very good values and turned those into very practical ways in which you can get things done. And you keep emphasising the importance of aspiration, that even though there is disadvantage, you're emphasising all the time that you must, as a teacher and as a school, raise aspiration for the highest level that kids can get to. So very important lessons there. In the course of what you spoke about, you made reference to special educational needs or additional learning needs. That's the second big issue, I think, in our school system. Educational disadvantage is so obvious, but my goodness, we're hearing day in, day out about the challenge of additional learning needs, special educational needs. Given your role as a leader in a number of schools, what perspectives do you hold on how as a society we're going to move forward in addressing those special educational needs?
I'm going to be probably very honest in this aspect of SEN, that the SEN system, unfortunately, for the last 30 years has been the same. And the SEN model has been the same and has not changed. And for me, unfortunately, the number of children being diagnosed with additional needs is increasing. So that presents huge challenges for schools and the special sector, particularly when there seems to be a significant deficit in the sector as well in terms of placement. So it's hugely challenging. What I would say is that the additionality of students with an additional need is very important to schools, because the inclusiveness, the personality, I suppose the way in which many of our students were SEN enrich the experiences of those other students, and the culture of the school is really, really important. However, it's hugely challenging. And I think moving forward, there's an end-to-end review going on at the minute in relation to SEN, and I would like to think that a more up-to-date research-informed based model, which is probably more practically based with room to manoeuvre and have flexibility, is a positive way forward. So for example, in our school, we have learning mentors, we have specialist classroom assistants in particular areas, we have a specialist literacy classroom assistant, we have specialists in health and social care, the same as in maths, we have an ASD specialist teacher with opportunities to go out, and we have targeted intervention around literacy, and we measure to see, are we making a difference, and what is that difference, and we use student voice. But it's hugely challenging. In our school, for example, we have the highest applications of students with additional needs to come to our school. Some of the children maybe that are applying have, specialist statements saying require a specialist setting, but unfortunately there's not places in specialist settings. We feel in some instances that we may not meet their needs. However, because there's not necessarily the places. They may be pigeonholed into a mainstream school, which may not be in their best interest. And that's not us saying, oh God, I want to educate all children. We're all welcome. But it's got to be the right fit for the child, most importantly. And the last thing I would want to do is for a child to come to our school and to fail and for not to do well. So I think it's hugely challenging area. I think it's really, really important that lessons and the approaches differentiate to facilitate the wide range of children arriving and being catered for in a school environment. But what I would say is, some of the children with an additional need in our school, they really enjoy being in the school. We love having them there, and they definitely have enhanced the experience of the staff and the students through, I suppose, our exposure to their challenges. And in many instances, it could be very humbling when you see progression, and it can be very humbling when you see that they have really, really flourished in that environment as well.
You've introduced an angle of positivity in there, which sometimes is not associated with special educational needs. It's always the negative we hear, but I'm very interested in your comments about how kids with special educational needs can bring a positivity into the life of the teacher and the life of the school as well, and that's very interesting. So we're coming to near the conclusion here, and of course our business here is initial teacher education, and we have these young people and some older people who are heading off into the teaching profession for the first time. So in the light of all the experience that you obviously have, what are your words of wisdom, so to speak, your advice and guidance for these people going into teaching for the first time? What do you think are the key messages they should be learning from as they take their place in society as teachers?
Well, I think it's very important. The first thing I would say is it's really important to be unjudgmental. When you go into a school, particularly as a teacher, and particularly potentially in primary, you're going to be exposed to so many different situations, to so many different dynamics. And children are very good at telling you everything that's going on, and sometimes it's not always. So it's important to be unjudgmental. I think it's important to be optimistic and positive, because I always think I want children to experience positivity, enthusiasm, a love for learning, so that when they go home, there's that desire to come back and to do it all over again. So I think it's really, really important to do that. I think it's important to work hard and to stay humble. I think we as teachers can make mistakes all the time. We don't always get it right. Sometimes we can learn from the young people, and I think it's important to be open-minded about that. I think a sense of humour. I remember not so long ago I had a tooth that was chipped, and I went to the dentist, and the dentist says, "No, I've just replaced that, Máire. Don't be worrying about it. I've blended it in. It's the same colour. The proper one will be here next week, and you wouldn't notice it." And I went straight back into school, and one of the kids said, "Oh, Miss, there's something yellow stuck to your tooth." And he thought he was helping me out. And kids are so honest. And sometimes there's no offence meant in that. So if you take yourself too seriously, something like that could escalate into something more than what it is. And I think it's important to have a sense of humour, take an interest in the young people's interest. I think teaching certainly is important in the classroom, but I always say to the new teachers that come into our school, it's the relationships outside the classroom. It's the corridor. It's the lunchtime. It's the break time. It's the morning. It's the Liverpool lost the game. What about Klopp leaving? What about Armagh losing? It's all of those things. It's the girls. Did you see the new TikTok dance? I don't think I could do that. Can you do it? It's all of those things that allow young people to relate to you. And if they can relate to you, I think that makes it easier in terms of their engagement levels, in terms of their motivational levels, their enthusiasm. Now, obviously, there are times you are not there as their friend, you're their teacher. But all of those things, I think, help in establishing firm relationships. And again, if you have to have strong boundaries, that's easier in an environment of respect.
Right. Well, so a lot of lessons to be learned for everyone watching and indeed listening. And finally, on a more personal question now, what do you consider to be the highlight or highlights of your career in the teaching profession? Now, I know that's a very difficult one, but maybe you'd give it a go.
I think probably my biggest highlight was obtaining the doctorate, I think, at the University for Service to Education. And the reason that I say that is my father left school at 14. My mother died when I was 5. And both my parents never got to see that. But their aspirations were always, you know, that education would be a route or a passport for me to, you know, provide better life experiences. So when I received that, that wasn't just about me. It was about recognition of all of the people that had helped me on my journey. And, you know, I talked about ETI earlier on. Some great inspectors come in to the schools that I have been in with great knowledge and wisdom. People in sport, people that have been colleagues. I think you don't become a leader without having great people around you, and in many instances better people around you. So for me, that wasn't just recognition of my work as a leader, it was recognition of all of the people on that journey that had helped me, all of the children who had influenced my life, my parents and their aspirations for me to do well, my sporting friends who had always encouraged and mentored me. So I think, and most importantly, my family who had stuck me and who are, you know, who have the greatest gift of tuning out to any talk about education of anybody I know. So, you know, that was a nice, I'd probably say that was most significant. And then I have a funny story. My husband didn't go to, when I was in London, I received the UK Headteacher of the Year award. I came out, it was being videoed by the BBC, and you come out of the green room and you've maybe like 2 minutes before you go back into the filming, and I phoned home and I said to my husband, Kieran, I won that award the other night. And he says, that's great, they'll see you when you get back, sure. And so, like, you know, in our house, there's no egos, there's, you know, all of that's important for about 5 minutes. Yeah. And then it's back to who's taking me to training, who's doing the cooking, whose job is it for this? And I think all of those things, I think, have allowed, I suppose they've proven to me that imposter syndrome as well, that, you know, irrespective of where you're from, your life circumstances, you can achieve, you can do well, you can influence people, and you can make a difference. And I think that's, the award was not really recognition of me. The award was for making a difference with, alongside all of those other people and teachers and, you know, cleaners and people who work in the office, the whole kaleidoscope and collective staff and groups and people that have helped me in the roles and the jobs that I've been in.
Yeah. Throughout this interview, you've used the term humble a lot, and that came across again in your last few comments there. And I should say, from my perspective, that the University of Ulster made a very good choice when they gave you the award of Honorary Doctorate for your services to education. So Máire Thompson, thank you for contributing to the voice of experience, learning from leaders. And thank you.
Thank you.